Gaslight quivers in the parlor and throws a weak circle on the floor like a coin dropped by a careless hand. The air is thick and warm, and the plaster breathes in and out with the night. Rain taps at the shutters, as if someone is waiting to be let in. Dust swirls in slow rings whenever the fan creaks. Portraits on the wall watch the room without blinking. Somewhere in the house a door closes, soft as a sigh. It is Savannah, 1897, and this old mansion has learned to keep its secrets. The wood smells of turpentine and river damp. The rugs hold the shape of every foot that ever passed here. And in the corner, under a sheet that used to be white, a gramophone sits with its brass horn tilted like a listening ear. It has not played all summer. People say the new machines steal voices and keep them. People say many things in a city where the past does not stop at the grave but stands under the oaks and waits for you to look up. The heiress moves through this room as if the room belongs to her breath. Her name is Clara Whitmore, and she was born to iron gates, lace gloves, and rooms that swallow other people whole. She is 20 and wears grief like a costume. The tailor has brought mourning silk, black as a closed eye. The seamstress has brought pins and chalk and a quiet face that does not rise to bait. She's called Evelyn in the ledger, but in the house people call her girl or you there, and sometimes not even that. The dressmaker's form stands close to the gramophone like a guard. The gaslight hums again and throws a narrow blade across the floorboards. Clara steps into it and out again and laughs. She is not laughing because something is funny. She is laughing because someone else is not allowed to. The seamstress draws the silk across Clara's shoulder and hums a simple tune to steady her hands. It slips into the air like thread through cloth. The melody is not fancy, not a show tune from the theatre, not a church hymn either. It sounds like work at dawn and a walk home at dusk. It sounds like a window opened for a minute to let the heat out. Clara hears it and does not let it pass. She copies the notes in a bright, sharp way, like a child mocking a sparrow. Then she lifts her chin and sings the tune again, higher this time, cruel in the edges and sweet only on the surface. Someone in the doorway flinches and moves on. Evelyn does not look up. A pin slips and draws a red dot on her own finger. She hides it in the folds of the cloth. The house holds the moment, then lets it go. On the table near the window lies a thin book of advertisements for the talking machines, drawings of horns and cranks, claims that voices can come home in boxes. Gentlemen bring them out after supper to make the room laugh. The gramophone in this parlor came down from New York in a crate with straw that still turns up in corners when the maid sweeps. It has played marches during a garden party when the hydrangeas were blue and heavy. It has played a comic song once with a chorus about a yellow shoe, but for months it has only gathered dust. The horn is streaked with the city's air. The crank is cold and stiff. The needle sleeps under a square of felt. Clara glances at it the way one glances at a mirror, to check if it still shows what you think it does. She asks the seamstress if she knows the new records. She does not wait for an answer. She repeats the seamstress's tune bright as glass now and says, "It is nothing." She says a song like that is fit for the laundry, not the parlor. She makes her voice sweet again and says, "Hush now. We must not waste air when we have silk to breathe." The seamstress nods. The chalk whispers along the hem. A thread breaks and is tied again. The rain grows heavier and then thins away. In the hall, footsteps stop and start as if people have agreed not to be seen. A maid passes with a tray. The ice knocks the sides of the glass and says its own small prayer. Downstairs, the cook scrapes a pan and hums a bar of the same tune without knowing why. Houses share sound in their bones. The song finds the stairs and rises. The house hears it, and so does the gramophone, which is only a thing and yet sits like a listening thing waiting for its hour. The parlor clock marks the time with a dry click that is almost not a sound at all. Clara steps onto a low stool so the seamstress can check the fall of the skirt. The silk drapes clean, cool to the touch, and the pins slide in like silver fish. Clara's mourning is for an uncle whose portrait hangs by the door, a man who liked fast horses and risk. There are rumors about notes he signed and men he owed. There are rumors about a woman he promised to help and then forgot. In this city, rumors keep better than preserves. Evelyn knows better than to repeat them. She keeps her own ledger in her head of hours worked and coins not paid, and names you do not say out loud if you want to be asked back. She hums because humming keeps her hands from shaking when someone laughs at her. She hums because the tune comes like breath and leaves like breath. Clara copies it one more time and turns the tune into a joke, not with words but with a tilt of the head and a little roll of the eyes. The kind of joke that says you cannot stop me. The seamstress lowers her eyes. The gramophone sits, and if it had hands it might lift them, as if to say not yet, not yet. Afternoon sinks into the edges of the room. The gas mantles are turned up a little to chase the creeping dark. The fire has gone to ash. A thin breeze slips under the door and brings in the smell of wet iron and the river. Somewhere a bell rings, counted by someone who has to count for others who will not. The tailor takes his leave and raises his hat to Clara with a careful flourish. Clara does not see him go. She is busy with the mirror, smoothing her hair, checking the line of her jaw, the shape grief gives to her mouth. People will praise her poise at the service. People will say the Whitmore girl holds up well. In this world, praise floats in the same river as scorn. It washes the same banks. Evelyn gathers her tools and tucks the chalk into a tin. She moves quiet, because quiet is the only wall she can build in this house. She lifts the hem and hooks it over a stand. She checks the seam, then the bodice, then the small hidden stitches that hold better than the showy ones. Her tune slips out once more, a soft ribbon of sound. Clara hears it again and gives a small bright laugh, like the clink of glass. She says nothing this time, but her laughter does the work. As day thins, the parlor grows a second self, the dim, reflective self that comes when lamps turn rooms into stage sets. The gramophone's horn becomes a dark flower. The brass rim drinks the light and gives none back. The polished table holds the shape of the horn in a faint oval of shadow. Someone has left a blank disc near the machine, a new record not yet played, and it sits like a promise. The needle, if touched, would give a fine, mean scratch across a fingertip. No one touches it. The room exhales. Clara steps down from the stool, satin slippers careful against the wood. She says the fit will do. She says to have it sent up before night. She says the tune is still in her head, and she will have to wash it out with proper music. Evelyn nods again. She reaches for her basket. She looks at the gramophone for a half-breath too long. It reflects her face in the curve of the horn, a thin image bent by metal there and not there. She turns away. In the long hall, the air changes. The quiet that earlier felt like soft cloth now feels like a held breath. The house is folded into itself. A draft moves through, and papers lift and settle. Behind a closed door, someone prays without sound. On the landing, the portraits of old judges and planters wear their dust like pride. The maid who flinched before slips back to check the windows. She hears a sound that is not rain. It is a ghost of a note, a vibration almost too small to count, like the edge of a glass when you run a wet finger around it. She tells herself it is the fan. She tells herself many things. Night comes down in pieces. The lamps in the street throw bars across the shutters. Spanish moss outside makes its slow low bow to the dark. The parlor waits. The gramophone waits. The house waits. And when houses wait, it is because something in them is moving toward a point that cannot be stopped. Upstairs, Clara changes into a gown meant to be seen by other eyes. Grief has many costumes, and the city knows all of them. She laughs a little in the mirror, then stops, then laughs again, softer, as if she has surprised herself. She is not unkind only because she wants to be. She is unkind because the world has taught her that the first voice in the room will not be the one to pay. She slips a ring on and checks its shine. She hums, and the hum is the same tune Evelyn used to steady her hands, but brighter, thinner, careless. In the servants' quarters, Evelyn folds the last of the black fabric and counts the pins. She turns the thimble in her palm. She tastes the tin of it, and it tastes like the ship that once brought her mother here, though she never sailed it herself. She hums the tune one last time to close the day. She does not know she has made a recording with no machine, a record pressed into other people's air. In the parlor, no one stands by the gramophone. No hand winds the crank. No needle is set. Yet a thread of sound slides into the room and hangs there, a single tone stretched thin across the space, like a hair you can only see when the light hits it right. Then another tone and another, and the tune that smelled like laundry and dusk and safe hands at a sewing table gathers itself from nowhere and begins to play. It is weak at first. It grows, as if the horn draws it in and gives it back. The first bar finds the corners. The second finds the stairs. The third finds Clara at her mirror, and she frees. The days that followed were heavy and slow, like air you could stir with a hand. The house wore its heat like a shawl. Paint curled on the window frames. The hall smelled of old flowers and candle wax. People walked softer than before, as if they were listening for something that might speak again. Clara moved through those rooms like a queen on a quiet stage. She had learned the power of a pause. She had learned that silence can be shaped like music. She did not need to raise her voice. A tilt of the chin did the work. A single word said low could undo a person who lived by favors and thin pay. Evelyn kept her eyes down and her needle true. She counted coins with careful fingers. One week she found a gap in the ledger where her name should be. She stood at the back stairs and waited for the housekeeper, who did not meet her eyes. The woman said there had been confusion. The woman said, "Come back Monday." The woman said, "Do not make trouble." In a place like this, trouble is what hungry people are called when they ask for what they earned. Evelyn nodded and swallowed the dry taste of chalk. Her song stayed inside her mouth. Whispers grew in the servant halls, not brave, only human. They said the gramophone had learned a soul. They said the parlor horn had taken Clara's laugh and stitched it to Evelyn's tune and sent both back out like a long, thin ribbon. Most people smiled and crossed themselves and got on with what must be done. Cook said the house had always been odd. The boy who hauled coal said the horn looked like it could drink a voice hole. At night, when the lamps were low and the ash smelled sweet, someone would hum the tune by mistake and then stop and touch a doorframe, the way people touch wood when they hope a thing will pass by without seeing them. Clara was pleased to be the center of the story again. She told it like she was the brave one. She said the machine had tricks, but she was not afraid. She said new things belonged to her world. She said old songs belonged to stops of work and not to parlors. When the dress was finally sent upstairs, Evelyn saw it only in parts. The way a worker sees a mansion, a sleeve here, a hem there, nothing whole. She held the silk and felt its weight. It flowed like water, but water that could drown. She pressed a seam and breathed on the iron when the steam ran thin. She did not sing. Her song had been taken and turned into a mirror that only reflected back her shame. Humiliation is not loud. It is a slow drip that finds every low place in you and fills it. The city's heat lasted longer than usual. Even the church bells seemed tired. Evelyn went home to a single room and a narrow bed. The window stuck in its frame. She set a glass bottle on the sill to catch night air that never came. Her mother's ribbon sat in a tin by the lamp. She turned it over once, twice, and put it away. In the morning she walked back to the house to ask for what was hers. Not more, just what had been agreed. She had rehearsed the words like lines in a play. She stood at the service door and tried to say them to the brass plate that held the bell. The butler opened just far enough that she could see his shirt front and not his eyes. He said Miss Whitmore had guests. He said a visit was not proper. He said any debts would be settled by post. The door shut with a soft breath, as if the house itself had spoken. By noon her name had fallen out of people's mouths. Clara's name was on everything that mattered. A masquerade was planned to mark the end of mourning. It would be clever, they said, to step back into bright rooms on the edge of autumn. The invitations were thick and creamy and smelled faintly of starch. A mask was sketched on the card in gold ink. There would be a band. There would be oysters. There would be laughter that dared the city to judge it. And there would be, as the gossip said, a demonstration of the marvel in the parlor. Clara liked that part the most. She told a friend they would make the machine sing. She told another they would trap a rumor and turn it into a party trick. The friend said the whole business felt unkind. Clara smiled and said kindness was for Sunday, not Saturday night. Evelyn heard about the party from the laundress who shared her pump. The woman told it the way people tell bad weather, coming certain, not for the likes of us to stop. Evelyn nodded and felt her stomach grow small. She had tried the church. She had tried the lawyer who said he did not take cases like hers. She had tried to sleep and woken with the tune in her ear like a mosquito that would not go. She told herself she would not go near that house again. She told herself she could not bear it. But humiliation has a strange pull. It wants to see its own face. It wants to know the exact shape of the hand that pressed it down. The night of the masquerade was clear and close. Spanish moss swung slow like a bell rope, moving before the sound begins. Carriages arrived and left their heat at the curb. The Whitmore porch lights made a golden wash on the steps. Masks moved through that light like small moons. Inside, the floors gleamed with wax. The air tasted of wine and salt. A string trio tuned in the corner, and then hid their own faces behind paper fans when the room grew bold. Men laughed at things that were not quite jokes. Women lifted their skirts just enough to float. Clara wore a mask of black lace, that made her eyes a secret you might spend all night trying to buy. She held a fan and tapped it against her palm like a metronome. The parlor held the gramophone the way a stage holds a single chair. Someone had polished the horn until it was a bright wound of metal. The crank lay on the table, innocent. A stack of records waited like dark coins. There were murmurs before anything happened. There were bets. There was the sound of almost laughter, the kind that looks over its shoulder to see if it's allowed. Clara let them wait. She had learned that appetite grows when held on a leash. She walked to the machine and set her fan down like a gauntlet. She spoke a few words about memory and invention. People smiled as if she had read them a clever epigraph. She slid a record from its sleeve and held it up. It caught the gaslight and threw it back in a thin razor ring. She placed it and set the needle down with more grace than care. The room pulled in a breath and held it. For a long heartbeat, there was only the soft wheel of the platter and the tiny complaint of the needle finding grooves. Then came the hush before a voice arrives. Then came a voice. It was small at first, as if the horn were learning to read, till it stumbled and caught, and then there it was, a trembling thread, human and warm and bare. It was not Clara's laugh this time. It was a woman's breath gathering itself into a tune. Some guests smiled and some did not. The song was plain. It had no lesson in it, no punchline. It sounded like a room where work is done, and someone is brave only to herself. It sounded like a window that will not open, but the heart tries anyway. People looked at each other, checking their faces, as if expressions too were a kind of mask you could put on wrong. The static grew and fell like a tide, and in its wash you could hear a name if you already knew it. Evelyn. A lady near the mantel pressed a gloved hand to her throat and said the word barely. A gentleman laughed because his face did not know what else to do. Clara stood with her fan lifted just so. She smiled the way a person smiles when the note she chose is the only note allowed. She said the machine was clever. She said it could catch stray sounds and make them new. She said, almost sweet, that this was how progress worked, but the voice under the static shook. It was not a stunt. It was a person. The needle quivered like a pointed finger. The horn gave back all the small hurts that room had heard and held. For a few breaths the party forgot itself. For a few breaths the house did not. The servants stood in the doorway in their dark clothes and their open eyes. The cook's boy crossed himself 3 times and then pretended he had only brushed at a fly. Someone clapped when the song thinned, but it was the clap of a single person who wants a charm to break. The record ended the way real things end, without a bow. The horn held its silence. The machine ticked as it slowed. There was a hush, then a brassy ripple of talk, too loud and eager. People said marvel. People said fancy trick. People said, you must tell us how. Clara laughed softly and said there was nothing to tell. She shrugged like a child caught with sugar. Her mask made her look kinder than she was. Evelyn had stood outside the open window and listened to her own voice cross a room where her body could not stand. She had walked there slow, not as a ghost, but as a person who needs to see the wound with both eyes. The smell of gardenias turned thick in her nose. The hedges held heat. Every note from the horn found her and sat in her chest like a coin dropped to the bottom of a jar. When the room clapped, she flinched, even alone in the dark. She did not cry. For if she did, the night caught it and kept it. It is strange to hear yourself made into an ornament. It is strange to watch your small piece of joy, something used to steady your hands, turned into a parlor joke by people who could pay for yours and not miss it. She left before the record turned still. Inside, the party regained its shape. Masks tilted toward wine. The band played a march to wake the floor. Clara danced with a man who smelled of whiskey and money. She glanced toward the window and saw nothing but her own reflection doubled by the glass. She felt clean and light. She told herself she had proved a point. She told herself a story where she had been brave and smart and funny. People told her she was. She smiled until the corners of her mouth ached. Near midnight, the air outside turned cool for the first time in weeks. A fog came low. Years pass like leaves turning underfoot, soft and quiet, and the house grows smaller around its own memories. The paint settles. The carpet's thin in the middle. The portraits keep their dust. Someone new owns the deed now, but the old names still hang in the air like the smell of smoke after a candle goes out. The gramophone sits where it sat before, horn tilted like a patient ear. It has a crack at the rim that catches light like a scar. No one winds it. No one trusts it. It became a curiosity in a room that forgot how to laugh. You could walk through this place on a late afternoon and hear only your shoes and the small clicks of wood cooling with the shade. Then a closet door sticks and opens, and old clothes give a sigh, and a folded dress slips down in a slow silken slide, as if it has been waiting for one more set of hands. The color is deep as grief, a black that has learned to drink light and keep it. The mourning dress belonged to Clara Whitmore. It still has her shape, the high collar, the narrow waist, the train meant to float more than sweep. It smells faintly of violets and iron, and long summers when rain would start without warning and end before you could name it. The seam in the lining has loosened at the hem. A careful woman notices what careless years ignore. She threads a needle to mend the tear, and finds that the thread does not meet cloth alone. Something stiff lies hidden there. Not baleen, not boning, not the scrap notes dressmakers tuck when they must. It is paper. It is folded small and twice, then small again, as if trying to hide inside itself. The first tug is gentle, but the fabric clings, like a mouth that does not want to open. Then the seam relents, and the paper comes out slow, damp in memory and dry to the touch, heavy with the press of a body that wore it close. There is no envelope, no stamp, only a sheet that carries the weight of a hand beyond the grave. The letter begins with a date that makes the room feel closer. September, 5 years after the masquerade and the river and all the unspoken things. It says, "I have kept this under my own skin," and the words already shake. The ink has bled in places. Faint feathers at the edge of each stroke, like something that tried to move and could not. The handwriting is clean but hurried, the kind of script taught by a strict aunt and ruined by a night that would not end. The confession is not grand. It does not stand on a table and raise its hands. It sits on the floor back against a wall and starts in the middle because shame cannot tell a neat story. "I wanted to be light," it says. "I wanted the room to be mine." It speaks of the new machine, the one sent in straw, the one they called a marvel when wine made them brave. It says a laugh can be a blade if you sharpen it long enough. It says jealousy is not the right word, but it will have to do. Lines cross lines where the writer starts again and again, trying to find a path through her own shadows. She sang to keep her hands steady, the letter says. "I learned the tune and made it a mirror. I set the needle down and told myself I was only showing a trick. It is hard to read where the ink has pooled. A tear must have fallen and met the wet of the word before it dried. The page smells faintly of metal and old nights. The woman holding it keeps reading because to stop is a kind of lie. Clara writes of the day she opened the record sleeves and found that blank discs are not blank at all, that they wait like flat dark ponds for any stone you throw. She writes how the horn made her brave and small at the same time, and how she liked the feeling of it, folding the room around her like a stage curtain. She writes of Evelyn, and here her hand shakes enough that the E leans. She writes of hands that sewed clean, of a mouth that sang lightly, of a gaze that did not rise, and how that made her angry without sense. "I wanted her to look up," the line says, and then the next says, "I wanted not to feel seen." She writes that she found the way to place the needle and make the machine catch breath, then tremor, then tone, until the parlor had a captive voice that could be started like a toy. She writes that she laughed because laughter was the rope that pulled her onto the safe side of the moment. She writes that she did not think about what the sound would do when it left the horn, and found the girl standing under the window, if she was there at all, if the night was close enough to carry. The letter is not clever. It is not dragging its finery through the dirt for show. It is plain and it hurts. "I told myself I had done nothing a man would not praise in a man," it says, and the line is underlined not once but twice. "I told myself progress is cruel only first," it says next, and the P scratches the page and tears a small white wound in the paper. There is a place where the ink turns pale, as if the pen had run dry and the hand kept moving. The sentence there is thin and shivering but clear enough to see. "I did not mean to make a grave." Then the writing grows thick again, and you can tell she dipped the nib deeper, that she wanted the next words to carry weight. "She is gone to the river, and the river is not the end," it says, and the room chills though the day is warm. "I hear the horn at night when I'm alone," it says. "I hear my own laugh and hers braided like hair, and I cannot lift my head." She writes that she gave money to the church and thought it would change her sleep. It did not. She writes that sometimes when she speaks to the mirror, her mouth moves, but the sound in the room belongs to someone else. She writes that the dress she wore to the service feels heavy as a door. "I sew this paper into its lining because a weight should be carried where the body remembers," it says, and the needle stops in the hand of the woman reading, because she feels the truth of that in her own shoulder. There is a blot at the bottom of the page, broad and black, as if a small bowl of ink had overturned, and then gotten up and walked out. Maybe it was only a drop of water. Maybe the night pressed its thumb there. The letter says, if anyone finds this, know that I... And then there is only the stain spreading, then dried in a map of cracks like river mud in a summer drought. A sentence without an end becomes a room without a door. The house hears the paper turn. The woman lays it on the table beside the gramophone, because where else does a confession belong here? The horn has kept its dust like a memory keeps its own weather. The felt pad is worn in the shape of a circle that knows too much. Outside, the sky loses its bright edge. Evening walks in slow. The air holds that old smell of river and iron and rain that might come, might not. She does not wind the machine. She knows better, and she also knows that what we know is a weak fence after dark. She stands still and listens to the quiet, until the quiet becomes a kind of noise. In that soft place, where the house remembers how to breathe and the porch boards settle and the last gnats smear the light, the horn finds its breath. The sound it makes is small, a whisper made of metal and air. Then the sound tests itself, as if it were looking for a throat. A thread of tone comes from the cracked rim, thin as a hair in the sun. The woman closes her eyes because it is easier to bear a sound if you are not looking for its face. The words arrive inside the tone, simple and steady. They are not Clara's words from the letter. They are not a song. They are a sentence with a spine strong enough to stand in the room. The song is not yours to keep, the horn says, and the room hears it the way a body hears its own name in a crowd. The first time, the sentence passes like a draft near a door. The second time, it settles in the parlor like a guest who means to stay. The machine is still and the record is still, and yet the air holds the voice as if it were a scarf thrown out and caught. The song is not yours to keep, it says again, kinder now, which hurts more. The woman who found the letter puts her hand flat on the table and feels the wood carry the ghost of a hum. She thinks of Evelyn, whose tune had no name on the ledger. She thinks of Clara, who learned too late that laughter is a tool that makes a cut you cannot see until it floods. She thinks of how the city tells stories with the wrong center and then makes a holiday of it. She thinks of the dress and the weight in the lining, and how some truths must be sewn into a garment to be believed. The horn gives one more soft breath, and then lets the room have itself again. There is a moment when all the sounds of a house return at once. A board sighs, a curtain whispers against a sill, the far clock clears its throat for the hour. The woman sets the letter back on the dress, as if covering a sleeping child. Years later still, the house is a museum with small plaques that bend language into polite shapes. People walk through at a slow, measured pace and read about wood types and dates. They point at portraits with faces that do not give anything away. They look at the gramophone and say, oh, the way people do when they see an object that once pushed the world forward. A docent tells a story in the cautious voice of a person who must keep donors. She says a letter was found. She says it spoke of jealousy. She says a seamstress drowned that same season, and her voice shows that she knows how to say drowned without making the day stop. She says the machine made a sound once, on a quiet afternoon when no one had set the crank, and half the group smiles because fielding a ghost is easier than fielding a wrong. The woman who found the letter comes sometimes and stands in the doorway. She does not correct the words. She looks at the dress behind glass. The fold of the train is neat as a thought you will not say out loud. The letter sits under the fabric in a copy that does not bleed. The blot is there, dried forever. The museum stands on a quiet street, where the air still smells faintly of river water and iron. Its walls used to be white, but time has painted them the color of dust. In the mornings, before the visitors come, the curator walks through the halls alone. Her shoes click on the old pine floors that creak in complaint. She likes the silence, the kind that lets the past breathe before the living fill it again. The room with the gramophone waits at the far end of the corridor, under a sign that reads Artifacts of Early Sound. The letters are clean, but the air beyond them is thick. Dust floats there like fine ash, and when sunlight filters through the tall windows, you can almost see the particles form a shape, something like a breath made visible. The curator is a careful woman. Her gloves are white, her touch deliberate. She has restored hundreds of machines, phonographs, recorders, turntables. But this one feels different. The brass horn has a thin crack that runs down its side, dark and almost beautiful. The base bears scratches like initials, marks of fingers that once wound it tight. She's read about this piece in an old ledger from 1897, found in a box labeled Estate of C. Whitmore. It mentioned a talking machine of curious nature. The clerk who catalogued it decades ago had written in shaky script, "Avoid use after dusk." The curator smiled when she saw that note, because museums love superstition. They give the past a pulse. Today, she means to test it for sound. A new exhibition is coming, Echoes of the 19th Century. The director wants an interactive display. She will clean it, adjust the arm, drop the needle once. Nothing more. She tells herself that before she begins, though something in her chest feels like someone else's hesitation. She leans close to the horn, smelling the faint metallic tang of time. Then she turns the crank. The gears inside groan in protest, and then remember what they were built to do. The platter begins to spin, slow and sure. She lowers the needle with a steady hand. The first sound is only static, a soft crumble like old paper being folded. Then underneath something forms. A tone, then a breath, and then a voice, low, distant, and undeniably human. It isn't a song at first, more a hum searching for its own melody. The curator freezes. The sound fills the corners of the room, curling around the displays, catching in the glass. Her eyes water, though not from fear. It's a voice that feels heavy with memory, one that has been waiting too long to be heard. She listens. The hum builds into a tune, fragile but clear. A woman's voice, trembling yet certain, singing a line that doesn't belong to any known hymn or folk song. Behind it, barely audible, another voice joins, lighter, higher, almost echoing her. For a moment they blend, one proud, one pleading. Two lives caught in the same groove. The curator feels the hair rise on her arms. She looks around the empty gallery as if the air itself might be singing. Visitors begin to arrive. She lifts the needle, but the sound does not stop. The horn keeps breathing out the same aching harmony, soft and slow like the turning of the tide. A couple walks in and tilts their heads, curious. "Is that a recording?" one asks. The curator says yes, though she doesn't know anymore. They listen. The man frowns and whispers, "There are two voices, aren't there?" The curator nods. More guests drift in. Each hears something slightly different. A lullaby, a lament, a confession. Some say the voices sound close, as if singing into each other's mouths. Others hear distance, one voice echoing from far away. No one can agree which one leads. By late afternoon, the air in the gallery feels thick. The temperature drops, though the thermostat holds steady. The gramophone keeps playing, its platter unmoving, its crank untouched. The curator leans on the desk and watches. The light has shifted. The windows glow amber. The song changes now, not in melody but in weight. The proud voice falters. The pleading one rises. They weave through each other until it's impossible to tell who began the tune. It sounds like forgiveness learning how to breathe. She remembers the story she read about this house before it became a museum. A seamstress drowned in the river. A young heiress who mocked her song. A letter sewn into a dress found years later. She recalls the archivist who processed the donation, how he wrote in his report, "Object accompanied by unverified folklore. Refrain from playing after restoration." She had laughed then. She isn't laughing now. The lights flicker once, a slow pulse like a heartbeat. The curator steps closer. Her reflection warps in the horn's curved metal. For an instant she thinks she sees another face beside hers. Blurred, serious, watching. She blinks and it's gone. But the music shifts again and the second voice grows clearer. It doesn't sing now, it speaks. The words are faint, bent by the machine's breath, but she catches them. "The song is not yours to keep." The curator's throat tightens. It feels as if the room is waiting for her to respond. She whispers, "Then whose is it?" Her voice disappears into the hum, swallowed whole. The gramophone slows. The tone stretches thin, the pitch dipping until it sounds almost like wind through iron. Then silence, full, absolute. The needle rests against the still record. She writes her notes in the logbook that night. Her hand shakes, but her letters are even. Test of Whitmore gramophone. Artifact 31B. She lists the condition, the materials, the estimated date of manufacture. Under remarks, she hesitates. Then she writes, "When needle lowered, device produced audio despite lack of disc movement. Multiple witnesses present, 2 distinct vocal patterns identified. 1 lower female presumed primary, Second overlapping voice matched pitch but differing tone, possibly same source recorded twice. She pauses, then adds a final line in smaller script. History remembers in sound what guilt tried to silence. She closes the log and exhales. Outside, Savannah leans into the evening. Streetlights blink on one by one. The smell of river mud drifts through open windows. Somewhere far off, a bell rings. Maybe from a church, maybe from a ship passing the wharf. The curator locks the door to the exhibit and heads down the hall, but halfway to the stairs, she hears it again. Faint, almost kind, a single hum following her down the corridor. She doesn't turn around. That night, security cameras record the gallery after closing. The footage shows the gramophone sitting still, the horn angled toward the empty room. For several minutes, nothing moves. Then the audio picks up a low vibration, not mechanical, more like a voice caught between breaths. The sound grows until it hums through the speakers, and a thin, quivering harmony joins it. The two merge, swell, fade. The timestamp blinks. Then silence returns. When staff review the footage the next morning, the audio is blank. The file plays, but no sound comes out. Yet those who were there swear they remember the melody. In the weeks that follow, visitors keep asking about the recording. Some say they heard words, others only tones that made their eyes sting for no reason. One elderly man says he recognized the second voice. He claims his grandmother sang that same tune while sewing, though she never said where she learned it. The curator listens quietly. She never confirms, never denies. She lets them believe whatever the house allows. Late one evening, when the museum is nearly dark, she stands before the display again. The horn catches a sliver of moonlight and looks almost alive. She whispers to the machine, softly enough that only history could hear her. She wasn't forgotten. The air holds still, then releases a long sigh, the kind wood makes when it settles after years of holding secrets. By morning, the record has a faint new mark near its edge, a groove that wasn't there before. The label, long blank, now carries the shadow of words too faint to read. She doesn't try to decipher them. She knows some messages aren't meant for the living to translate. Outside, the city wakes. Cars hum down streets older than their drivers. Tourists take photos of houses that remember too much. The river keeps moving, same as ever. Yet inside the museum, if you listen closely at the right hour, the air still hums. It isn't loud. It's not even always there. But sometimes when the day is quiet and the sun strikes the brass horn just so, you can hear it, a thread of a tune, tender and mournful, two voices bound together at last, one proud, one pleading. Neither alone anymore, and though the curator knows better than to name what she hears, she keeps the logbook open on her desk, the last line underlined once in blue ink. History remembers in sound what guilt tried to silence. Outside, the bells toll again, low and slow, and the house, now a museum, exhales. The light fades, the song rests, the silence remains. But if you listen hard enough, you might swear it still sings.